What is the root cause behind the troubles? When all your relationships end up in a bubble, hey, it's just a relationship that sometimes makes you trip. It's just a relationship.
Welcome to Just Relationships Podcast. I am Terrence Payton, known to many as TP, where we unpack the ties that bind and have conversations that define our connections. Hey, listen, I want to come and talk to you all about relationships. What is a relationship actually? What does it look like? How does it feel? How are relationships defined? How can we navigate these relationships when they get really, really hard? First, let's define the word relationship, which is basically a connection or an association between two or more people encompassing various forms like family ties, friendships, romantic partnerships. What about your professional relationships as well? It signifies a way individuals meet or interact, a way they behave, way they feel towards one another. You know, relationships involve a link or a bond between two or more entities, whether it's people, whether it's groups, or hey, or even things. These are how relationships are formed. I have been married for 19 years, and my wife and I have 7 kids. Yes, I said 7 kids. And yes, you got to be a little crazy to have 7 kids, and yes, I am. But to be able to navigate those relationships, let me just be real with you. It has been extremely difficult all the way around. With our kids, my wife, you're trying to navigate a relationship with somebody that you're the complete opposite with, and they say opposite attracts. But that's another conversation for another day. But having 7 kids, yes, 7 kids, 4 girls, 3 boys, and we are a blended family, trying to navigate a relationship with my biological kids as well as my non-biological kids, hey, it has not been easy whatsoever. Throughout the time that we've been together, we have learned to grow and figure it out and know exactly what that is supposed to look like. What's important in a relationship? Do you realize that in all of our relationships, they all start when we are a kid? Well, we literally have relationships with our parents or non-relationships with our parents. You know, whether we grow up in a two-family household, a single-parent household, parents who never got married, or parents that got divorced, all of that forms who we are, who we grow up to be. What type of relationship would we eventually have as we continue to grow up? You having that relationship with your mother, with your father, with your cousins, with your aunts and uncles, when we are a little kid, will form what your relationships look like when we are adults. You know, my parents got divorced when I was a little kid. We moved from Chicago, Illinois, Chi-Town, to Memphis, Tennessee. Let me tell you, for me, at that young age, it was difficult getting to know my cousins that I hadn't met yet. My aunts, my uncles, even my maternal grandmother. Think about this. I was starting school with. What I realized was in the process was that I struggled. I mean, struggled greatly because as a little kid, just think about it, y'all. I'm 5 years old. I'm entering kindergarten. My father's not around, and I'm in new surroundings. I'm having emotions that I don't even understand. And the thing that stuck with me was my mother always telling me, son, you can do anything that you want to in life because you're smart, you're adventurous, you're handsome. You know, my mother gave me all the accolades any person could ever need to affirm me as a kid. But you know what? I had one thing missing, and that was missing my father, not affirming me as being enough. And I would realize later that I grew up feeling not worthy because of my first relationships that was supposed to be the most important to me as anything in the world, which were my parents, my mother, and I grew to have a great relationship, but not so much with my father. You know, I went back to Chicago, Christmas time, summertime, sometimes Thanksgiving, and, would alternate Christmas and Thanksgiving when I would go. But I always spent that time with my grandparents and my uncles, my aunts, my cousins, but never really had spent a lot of time with my father. And as those days went on, I began to become very angry at my father. And as a kid, listen, I don't really know why I felt that way. All I knew, I was an angry kid. I had no clue why I was like that. I really didn't want to have a relationship with my father. I started feeling this way around 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. I began to be angry as a kid with him. And sadly, I didn't understand it at all. Having that relationship, or I should say, lack thereof, a relationship with my father, it started me to distrust people. But the blessing is that my uncles, hey, they were the best. I grew up with them. They loved on me. They gave me all the things. But let me tell you, I had old school uncles, where if you fall, they would tell you to get up, suck it up, be a man. Yeah, that's what I grew up with. I remember being at my great grandfather's funeral, that was my guy, okay? That was my dude all day long. And the first time, matter of fact, I heard a curse word was with him. And he would curse people out in a heartbeat. And it was the funniest thing to me. But anyway, we're at his funeral, and I started to cry. And I'm standing in between two of my uncles. And simultaneously, they told me, don't cry, be a man. And I'm looking up at both of them, and I'm like, dude, I'm 8, okay? Is that what kids supposed to do? Yeah, but that's the way I grew up, which also set the precedence in my life of not really having empathy because I was always told to not show emotions. Those are the things that I learned along the way, which affected my relationships. And sadly, learning to not show emotions and not learning with empathy at an early age really affected my relationships. And I didn't really find out about empathy and how much I needed it until I started having kids. And I can tell you, I'll give credit to my wife for that one. But these are conversations that we'll talk about more in depth on future episodes when we break down how our relationships are formed when we lack certain social skills. But the foundation of our relationships are formed through our parents, through our grandparents, our cousins, uncles, aunts, all from the beginning. And those relationships are formed at that time. But what about the hurts that are formed through that foundation? We tend not to talk about that part. If you grew up in a single parent household, there are hurts that you have that you don't even realize that you have, and that they are forming your relationships and how you look at relationships from that point. If you grew up in a two-parent household where your parents were both loving, they both were attentive, they gave you all the things. It also affected what your relationships will look like. And as we go through these talks, I'm going to pinpoint all these different types of relationships. People that came from two-parent households that were healthy or seemed to be healthy, or single-parent households where different things happened that formed you as a person and what that looked like, what that felt like as a kid growing up. Because, think about this. When you grow up and you start going to school, well, you have all these other kids that are just probably just as messed up as you are. And sometimes kids can be really, really cruel growing up. They can call you names. Some grow up to be bullies. And these are all because of the relationships that were formed from the beginning with our parents, our cousins, our uncles, our aunts, all those first relationships that we have. Now, what I want to be able to start touching on is how do we get past some of the things that affected us in a negative way, which causes some of these relationships to not be as great as they are? How do we grow from the relationship that was formed when we were little kids to this present day? What does that look like? How does that feel to you? How do we get healed, most importantly, from some of those things? Because there are things that affected us from a little kid, from the time that we were able to start forming words. When I look back at it, especially now, and I look at my kids when they were little, what was their relationship like with me? What was it like with their mother? What was it like with their friends that they were around every day? And I started watching, paying attention to those days because it made me think of having 7 kids. I wanted my kids to grow up and have great relationships. Now, is that something easy to do? Absolutely not. It's not easy to do. None whatsoever. It's a very difficult thing to do. And we must be able to figure out what that looks like. Because, of course, we grow up to be adults. And if those relationships as kids are sucky, and yes, I said sucky, then what is that going to look like as an adult when you start going into the real world on these jobs? Because you're no longer in high school or you're no longer in college, if that's the route you took. Now you have to go and get a job. And now you have work relationships. What does that look like? How are you going to take what you've learned and grew up to be to have a relationship, hey, with your boss, your peers? What does that conversation look like? As I'm watching my kids grow up, and mind you, I can be the first to tell you, because I had such a rocky relationship with my own father, it just caused me to have hard relationships with my own children as well. Now, the one thing it did make me want to be a great father. I had great desires to be a great father, completely opposite of what I grew up with, giving my kids all the things that I desired, that I wanted. But hey, did I fail? Absolutely, I failed. Do I still fail? I do. I still fail because I'm still trying to navigate all the things that were negatively formed in me. Now I have to dissect, change, fix, figure out how to become a better human. When we're talking about these relationships with all the people that are around us, how do we go about identifying what those things are that makes for a good relationship or a bad relationship. But not only identifying them, but am I the same with everyone or am I different with certain people? Why is that? Is it because individuals are different? Absolutely. But why is that person different? It's all based on how we grow up and what that foundation was and how it was formed. It's really all about our first relationships, which is why I want to give you some characteristics of a good relationship. The first one would be mutual respect. Yes, this involves valuing each other's opinions, feelings, and boundaries. It also means respecting each other's individuality and independence. Now, as a kid, how much do you know about mutual respect? You might learn it along the way. You might hear your parents talk about respect, especially if you grew up with a father, uncles, male cousins, because most men want to be respected. Now, women want to be loved, but still respected. But you start learning what respect is as a kid. But how often have you heard your parents talk about mutual respect and what it means? Some of you might have learned it early on, but I can assure you I didn't. I ain't learned it at all. But let's talk about the next subject. Open communication. Honest and transparent communication is crucial. People should be able to express their thoughts and feelings openly and listen to each other's perspectives without judgment. When you think about open communication, what do you think about? Can you do it without judgment? Can you be transparent? How important is it for you to be transparent with the people that you're around? Now, you will hear all of us say a zillion and one time, I can't be transparent because people take advantage of me or they judge me. If I can't be transparent because you're going to take what I said and use it against me, now you have also violated one of the number one things in a relationship, which is trust and honesty. Trust is built on honesty and reliability. People should feel safe. They should feel secure in the relationship, knowing that they can rely on each other. If I can be honest with you, if I can trust you, then if I can't trust you, then why do we even have a relationship at all? What does that look like? What about emotional support? A healthy relationship provides a safe space for people to share their emotions and offer support to each other during challenging times. What does that look like to you? How does that feel to you? Because when you're talking about emotional support, I can't begin to tell you how many times I screwed that one up, especially with my wife. My wife would share something with me and I would say something stupid to make her feel unsafe. Let me give you an example. My wife will come and tell me about something about how she feels about a situation that she might be going through. And little old me, I would sit back and I would judge her for feeling that way or make her feel bad about her actions when all she wanted to do was vent. Now, how safe do you think she felt after that conversation? Yeah, not at all. None whatsoever. But what about those people, mostly men, that don't show their emotions? What kind of emotional support do you think they need? Sometimes it's hard to talk with women as a man, with other men as well, about your emotions because you don't want to be perceived as weak. or judged. But nonetheless, you still need that support. Now, unfortunately, most men were taught not to have emotions, not to show emotions, so that's where all that comes from. But men become stoic and they don't talk about their feelings. It's the craziest thing ever because if you don't talk about it, then what? Who are you having those conversations with? And then what happens is you hold on all those emotions inside you. You keep pushing them down, pushing them down, pushing them down. And then what? What do you think? After you push those emotions down for a period of time, at some point, what goes down is coming back up at some point. Those emotions are going to shoot right back up. And then what you do at that point, because at the end of the day, when those emotions come back up, you don't know how they're going to come back up, how you're going to be affected by it. But at some stage of life, you have to be able to deal with those emotions, which I think is a great thing for a man to be able to have emotional support. Of course, with women, we all should have that. With other men, with his spouse, significant other, with his kids, whatever that looks like, because that will form a great relationship and allow healing to take place. What about quality time? Making time for each other and engaging in activities together strengthens the bond and fosters intimacy. Quality time is also one of the 5 love languages. If you haven't read that book, definitely get it because it is a great book to have. Is that important to you to have quality time? Is that important to the person that you're in a relationship with? What about healthy conflict resolution? Oh yeah, now that's a big one. Disagreements are inevitable, but healthy relationships involve constructive conflict resolution, focusing on understanding and finding solutions rather than resorting to blame or negativity, pointing the finger at the other person. This is one of the things that my wife and I talk about when we are counseling couples, because relationships should argue. Yes, should argue. They should have conflict. But the most important thing is that you have healthy conflict resolution. And one thing that I have realized being married, the one thing that my wife and I have always believed in is we argue in front of the kids. Not all the time, but we do. And we make up in front of the kids. Very important. Because the goal was always to be able to allow them to see what conflict looks like. How do you make up from an argument that you're both angry and mad about, that you're yelling and you're screaming at each other? And then you go back behind closed doors and you make up. And they never see you make up. They never get to learn what healthy conflict resolution looks like. What is that conflict resolution? How do we get to it? They don't get to learn that. And I'm thankful that my wife and we had the opportunity to be able to argue in front of the kids, but the goal was always to go back and make up in front of the kids as well. Now, sometimes the making up part, lasts a little longer than what it should have. But that's the reality of life, right? It happens. But at the end of the day, we go back and we try to sit down and explain to the kids so they can understand not only what conflict looks like, but what is the resolution to it, right? Having the opportunity to show your kids, show people around you when you have conflict, but also being able to show the resolution to the conflict and coming back and having that in front of people is really great. Now, the last one is probably the most important of them of all. I will leave you with this one as we continue to dive into just relationships. And that one is forgiveness. Being able to forgive mistakes and move forward is essential for maintaining a healthy relationship. In any relationship, I don't care what relationship you have, whether it's you and a teacher, you and a peer, you and a coworker, you and a sister, cousin, brother, mother, whatever, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, whatever that looks like, you have to be able to have forgiveness. Because if you can't forgive, that's going to ruin every relationship that you have. And I do mean every relationship that you have. All my life, I was very angry at my father. My father died when I was 19 years old. And just right before he died, we started to form a relationship. The sad thing is, when I was 19 years old, I called my dad Pops for the very first time. Now, I'd never used any of those terms, dad, daddy, father, whatsoever. When somebody said, hey, go tell your dad come here, I would say, hey, they want you. I was like, hey, yeah, they want you in there. I never called him dad because for so long, I was such an angry kid that I never allowed that to happen. I was angry for so many different reasons. And unfortunately, I didn't even realize half the stuff that I was angry about. And the saddest thing of all, I didn't get the chance to say, Dad, I forgive you. Dad, I'm sorry for my part. Never got the opportunity to sit back, ask the question, hey, Dad, what happened? What's your side of it? Because in 19 years, I heard my mother say certain things about their relationship, even though I will say this, and this I can really, really, really appreciate. My mother never once talked badly about my father, to me anyway, and she never told their business. I never really knew what happened in the relationship. All I did know was this. They got a divorce. I had an older brother. He was roughly between 4 and 6 months old before he passed away. And he passed away of pneumonia. And my mother blamed my father. My father blamed my mother. Yeah, and I don't even know if they ever forgave each other. I know they got a divorce, and that's what started, I guess, to say my downward spiral, because I had no clue who I was, what my life would end up being like in that moment, because I'm just a kid and I don't really know anything whatsoever. But this is the thing. At 19, my father died, and all I wanted to know was all the whys. I really did. And I had never forgiven my father or had the opportunity to say, I'm sorry for my part. Now, although you all could say, well, you were a kid and he was supposed to be a dad. Yeah, true. But at the same token, I still was supposed to have that respect with him. You know, we just talked about mutual respect. And let me tell you, I didn't have respect for my father. I didn't because I was too angry. I didn't even know what that looked like to have respect for him. I never gave him the opportunity to say he was sorry. And I was still angry all my life while he was alive. And as we began to start to have a relationship, because he died, we didn't talk about us or my anger, or it was all surface level stuff. And this was when I was about 19. Nothing ever deep, no long conversations. Our conversations probably didn't last more than 15 minutes. And at that stage of life, I wanted to be able to have this relationship with him, only for him to die about 6 months later. But I realized after he died that I had to forgive him. And I know some of you all say, well, he is gone, so why do you have to forgive him now? Hey, in reality, it wasn't for him, because forgiveness is for me. And I have to tell you all, You have to know that when somebody is angry at you, somebody does something to you, forgiveness is not for them. And I know some of you will say, well, I'll forgive, but I won't forget. Well, you didn't really forgive when you don't remember exactly what a person did to you. That's true forgiveness. Let me say that again. If you say I'll forgive but I don't forget, you didn't really truly forgive that person. Because when you forget what they did, that's a different story. And I'm not saying that you don't remember the act, because you pack it up in your wisdom jar so you can be aware when someone else tried to do the same thing to you, that you know how to defend yourself from it. But you don't hold it over their head, because forgiveness is all about you. It's all about you getting healed. It's all about you letting go of the stuff. Listen, I said all that to say this, is that forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for you. And you want to forgive those people that have wronged you, who have injured you. You have to be able to forgive them. Now, I'm not saying you have to be their best friend, but I'm saying at some point, you have to learn to forgive them, because at the end of the day, think about this. Who have you wronged? And at some point, they need to forgive you. And especially if you get to the maturity stage of being able to go apologize to somebody, and then you ask for forgiveness and they say, no, I'm not forgiving you, then what? You might feel some kind of way at that point until they release you from it. So forgiveness is huge. And I'm going to tell you, we'll talk more about this as the time goes on. But I want to make sure that those that have wronged you in your relationships, you find out some kind of way to forgive them, because you're the one that needs the healing. You need to be able to walk away, to be free. You want to be able to have peace at night and not worry about people, things, stuff, all the crap that goes on. But hey, let me also leave you with this. Relationships is what we do. Relationships is a big part of who we are. And every part of our being is connected to a relationship. And if you don't get those relationships right, if you don't get those relationships together, guess what happens? You are the one that ends up suffering in the long run. So remember this. Relationships are hard. And every relationship is different. How will you show up in your present relationships and the ones to come? Will you show love, forgiveness, honesty, and truth? Will you allow your hurts, your anger, your walls that you put up every time someone gets too close? Will you examine every relationship that you have and make sure you are a better person, that you are the example? Last thing I'll say is this. Be the change that you want to see in all your relationships. It's up to you. It's not necessarily up to the other person. It's up to you. Well, hey, see you back next week on Just Relationships. I am yours truly, Terrence Payton, TP. See you next time.
Why is it easy and hard to have a good relationship? What is the root cause behind the troubles? When all your relationships end up in a bubble, hey, it's just a relationship that sometimes makes you trip. It's just a relationship.